Baseball, where legends are made, the strange becomes the spectacular, and every day tells a story worth remembering. January 1st, 2009, before streaming, before notifications, before every highlight lived in our pocket, baseball flipped into a new light. MLB Network. A place where the game never slept, where box scores turned into conversation, and winter nights started to feel a little shorter. There were studios instead of scroll bars, analysts breaking down swings to telestrators, and voices like Greg Amsinger, Dan Plesac, Harold Reynolds, and Lauren Shahadi welcoming fans like old friends. From hot stove rumors to October magic, MLB Network became baseball's living room. And on that New Year's Day in 2009, baseball didn't just start a channel, it started a tradition. Pull up a chair tomorrow and we'll have another story to tell here on This Day in Baseball. Baseball, where quiet moves often matter the most. January 2nd, 1996. On a winter day that barely made headlines, the Red Sox signed left-hander Jamie Moyer to a simple one-year deal. No flash and no buzz, just a pitcher who relied more on his brain than the radar guns. By July, Boston had traded Moyer to the Seattle Mariners for outfielder Darren Bragg, and that's where our story really begins. In the Pacific Northwest, Moyer didn't just stick, he thrived. 10 seasons, multiple 20-win seasons, an all-star appearance, and a career that proved you didn't need velocity when you understand how to pitch. Started as a quiet January signing, became one of the greatest second acts in baseball history. Sometimes the loudest legacies start with the softest throws. Pull up a chair tomorrow as we'll have another story to tell here on This Day in Baseball. Baseball, where legends are made, the strange becomes spectacular, and every day tells a story worth remembering. This day, a deal was quietly announced that the Red Sox would sell Babe Ruth to the New York Yankees for $100,000. Little headlines and not much fanfare. It was just a signature on a contract that echoed throughout baseball for nearly a century. He was a star in Boston, but he became so much more in New York. He became a phenomenon. A home run hitting machine, a spark that lit the Yankees dynasty. Meanwhile, the Red Sox, they wouldn't win a World Series for 86 years. While their rivals, the Yankees, became one of the most storied franchises in not just baseball history, but in sports history as a whole. Sometimes baseball isn't just about the game that day, it's about the empire that day built. Pull up a chair tomorrow and we'll have another story to tell here on This Day in Baseball. Baseball, where legends are made, the strange becomes spectacular, and every day tells a story worth remembering. January 4th, 2010, Adrian Beltre, future Hall of Famer, signed a one-year pact with the Boston Red Sox. At the time, it wasn't much to write home about, as Beltre was coming off his worst offensive season of his career in Seattle, so the bat was questionable, but his glove was very much value. But Boston was right to believe anyway, as he led the team in wins above replacement, led the AL in extra base hits, returned to the All-Star game, and won a Silver Slugger. Then came Texas, as in 2011 he signed a deal with the Texas Rangers, and his story turned historic. 3,000 hits, 3 more Gold Gloves, 2 more Silver Sluggers, and 3 more All-Star appearances. And now a Hall of Famer. All because one season opened the door. Pull up a chair tomorrow and we'll have another story to tell here on This Day in Baseball, where legends are made, the strange becomes spectacular, and every day tells a story worth remembering. January 5th, 2001, the Seattle Mariners signed a player unlike any the major leagues had ever seen, Ichiro Suzuki. He arrived from Japan with lots of questions swirling around him. Could his swing translate? Could his style of play work in the major leagues? Well, baseball got its answer rather quickly. That very season, Ichiro had done something that no other major league player had ever done before. Win MVP and Rookie of the Year in the same season. And he never slowed down. 10 straight seasons of 200 or more hits, 10 straight seasons of a batting average 300 or better, and in 2004 he broke George Sisler's single-season hit record. A Hall of Fame career built on precision, speed, and a swing that seemed to defy logic. Ichiro didn't just change the Mariners, he changed how we see greatness. Pull up a chair tomorrow and we'll have another story to tell here on This Day in Baseball. Where legends are made, the strange becomes spectacular, and every day tells a story worth remembering. January 6, 2012. The Chicago Cubs made a trade that barely moved the needle at the time, acquiring young first baseman Anthony Rizzo from the San Diego Padres for starting pitcher Andrew Cashner. Rizzo had struggled in his first taste of the majors. Questions followed him too, but Chicago believed that there was more to him. And they were right. Rizzo grew into the face of the franchise, a leader through losing seasons, rebuilds, and summers at Wrigley Field. Three-time All-Star, four-time Gold Glove, a Silver Slugger, and even won a Platinum Glove. And then in 2016, the moment Cubs fans have been waiting more than a century for. The World Series title, with Rizzo standing at first base, right where history finally changed. Sometimes the biggest trades aren't about what you give up, they're about who that player finally becomes. Pull up a chair tomorrow and we'll have another story to tell, here on This Day in Baseball. Baseball, where legends are made, the strange becomes spectacular, and every day tells a story worth remembering. January 7th, 2011, the Chicago Cubs acquire Matt Garza from the Tampa Bay Rays for 4 prospects. Garza was coming off one of the best moments of his career, including this no-hitter back in 2010, and the Cubs believed that he could be their frontline starter of the future. However, the cost was heavy, including sending Chris Archer, Sam Fuld, Brandon Guyer, and Robinson Chirinos over to the Rays. Garza gave the Cubs exactly what they wanted: solid innings, toughness, and the Cubs just could never break through. Meanwhile, the trade's real story happened in Tampa Bay. Chris Archer turned into an all-star caliber starting pitcher. Robinson Chirinos turned into a journeyman backstop. And both Sam Fuld and Brandon Guyer turned into nice outfield depth pieces. It's one of those trades that looks one way in January, but a lot different years later. Pull up a chair tomorrow, we'll have another story to tell here on This Day in Baseball. Baseball, where legends are made, the strange becomes spectacular, and every day tells a story worth remembering. January 8th, 2016, the game found itself in a very unusual spotlight. St. Louis Cardinals Director of Scouting Chris Correa pleaded guilty to multiple federal charges admitting to illegally accessing the Houston Astros internal database. This wasn't sign stealing, this wasn't gamemanship, it was a cybercrime. Correa used a former Houston Astros employee's password to gain entry into proprietary information, such as trade discussions, scouting reports, and internal evaluations, crossing a line that Major League Baseball had never confronted before. Correa would become the first person in professional sports history to be sentenced to federal prison for hacking a rival team. Cardinals were fined $2 million and had to surrender future draft picks. It was a reminder that baseball, as in life, integrity matters just as much as intelligence. Pull up a chair tomorrow and we'll have another story to tell here on This Day in Baseball. Baseball, where legends are made, the strange becomes spectacular, and every day tells a story worth remembering. January 9th, 2005, on a quiet winter morning, the New York Mets made a loud move, signing outfielder Carlos Beltran to a 7-year deal. Fresh off a postseason that felt almost mythical, Beltran arrived in Queens with power from both sides of the plate, great speed, and even better defense in center field. And over the next 7 seasons, he delivered. As a Met, Beltran won 2 Silver Sluggers and 2 Gold Gloves, anchoring center field with grace and authority, as well as being a 5-time All-Star. He also hit for power, hitting 149 home runs and driving in 559 runs, and also stole 100 bases. He also helped the Mets on multiple postseason runs, including the 2006 Mets that came just one swing away from making the World Series. A superstar signing and a cornerstone in Mets history. Pull up a chair tomorrow and we'll have another story to tell here on This Day in Baseball. This trade was ordinary and became one of baseball's biggest what-ifs. On this day in baseball, January 10th, 1991, the Orioles made a move to win now. Baltimore sent 3 young players to Houston, Curt Schilling, Steve Finley, and Pete Harnisch, for a proven power bat in Glenn Davis. And at the time, it made sense. At the time, Schilling was a struggling young reliever trying to find himself. Steve Finley was a 4th outfielder who was athletic but yet unfinished. And Harnisch, he was just another arm in the system. Meanwhile, Davis was coming off 3 straight 30-home run seasons, and the Orioles thought they were getting a sure thing. But baseball, as it often does, has other plans. Davis would barely play again, Schilling would strike out over 3,000 batters, and Finley would blossom into an all-star and Gold Glove caliber outfielder. 2 careers rose after being traded away. What felt like a routine deal became a reminder. In baseball, patience can be the most valuable asset of all. This signing didn't just add a pitcher, it changed expectations. On this day in baseball, January 11, 2010, the Reds took a gamble on pure electricity as they signed 21-year-old Cuban reliever Aroldis Chapman to a 6-year deal, the richest contract ever given to an international amateur pitcher at the time. With stories, fastballs that blurred, and velocity that didn't seem triple digits and more, and then eventually 106 miles an hour, the fastest pitch ever recorded. What followed was a career based on dominance, an all-star closer, a postseason weapon, and one of the most feared arms of a generation. The Reds didn't just sign potential, they signed something that baseball had never seen before. Sometimes the game whispers, and sometimes it announces itself at 106 miles an hour. This MLB player returned from military service and reminded everyone why he's the best in the game. On this day in baseball, January 12, 1946, Red Sox outfielder Ted Williams returned from military service. Williams was drafted into the Marines in 1943, just 2 years after he hit .406 in a season. When Williams came back, there were questions on if he'd be the same player again. But Williams proved the doubters wrong as he would set a career high in WAR with 10.6 and hit this amazing triple slash, leading the league in on-base and slugging percentage, and also set a career high in home runs. This wouldn't be the first time that Williams had to step away from the game due to military service. Between 1952 and 1953, Ted Williams would bounce between baseball and the Korean War. There are many questions of what Ted Williams' career marks would be if he never took a break from the military. The war efforts may have taken the game away from Williams, but when he came back, he always made every at-bat count. This trade may have unlocked this star pitcher's full potential. January 13, 2018, Garrett Cole was traded from the Pirates to the Astros. Cole was talented, that much was clear, but he never quite lived up to his number 1 overall expectations he had in Pittsburgh. He had some good seasons, but never some great ones. Houston Astros still believed. The Pirates received Joe Musgrove, Michael Feliz, and infielder Colin Moran in return from the Houston Astros. And Musgrove wasn't that bad in Pittsburgh. But everything changed overnight in Houston. Cole became one of, if not the best pitcher in baseball in Houston, going to 2 All-Star games, and maybe should have won the Cy Young Award in 2019, in which his team ultimately lost to the Washington Nationals in the World Series. Let me just change my hat and jersey. Cole was throwing more fastballs and striking out more batters than ever before in his career, and it ultimately led him to become, at the time, the highest paid pitcher in baseball. Sometimes a career doesn't need fixing, it just needs the right place to breathe. Sometimes the hardest decision is just choosing one dream. January 14th, 2019, Kyler Murray declares for the NFL Draft. Just months earlier, Kyler had been drafted by the Oakland A's 9th overall and signed a contract that would give him a path to the big leagues. He had speed and a strong arm, with many believing he had a future on the diamond. But Murray played his final year at Oklahoma as quarterback and eventually won the Heisman Trophy, meaning he probably was going to play quarterback for an NFL team. He had a number 1 overall pick projection. It was a decision that came with risk, pressure, and a brighter spotlight. Murray was drafted 1st overall by the Arizona Cardinals and became the face of their franchise. Meanwhile, baseball lost a talent it never really got to see unfold. Some decisions are very difficult, but it's all about believing in yourself and what's ahead. Sometimes a goodbye is only half the story. On this day, January 15th, 2018, the Pirates traded longtime franchise cornerstone Andrew McCutchen to the Giants for prospect Brian Reynolds. McCutchen, for nearly a decade, was Pittsburgh baseball. He attended all of his All-Star games there. He won MVP, all of his Silver Sluggers, and was a fan favorite amongst Pittsburgh fans. Coming back the other way was switch-hitting outfielder Brian Reynolds, who was a prospect at the time. Not much headlines, but he turned into a lineup cornerstone in that Pittsburgh offense that hasn't seen a lot of success as of late. McCutchen brought leadership and power to San Francisco, while Brian Reynolds ended up becoming one of the more complete hitters in the game. And that's how baseball often works sometimes. The past says goodbye, and the future just walks on in unannounced. Baseball doesn't change often, but when it does, everyone feels it. On this day, January 15th, 2014, MLB officially expanded instant replay. It used to be that calls were final when they were made. In 2008, MLB introduced instant replay specifically for home runs. Managers could challenge plays such as tags, close plays at first, diving traps in the outfield, and all that kind of stuff. Supporters of instant replay said it was long overdue, that this should have happened years ago because the NFL and NBA had replay systems already in place. While critics of instant replay thought it would mess with timing and tradition of the game, such as the human element. Also, it could have helped recall plays like this. Baseball will always argue balls and strikes, but they decided that getting the call right was a little bit more important. The Twins kept their star, and it paid off. On this day in baseball, January 17th, 2003, the Minnesota Twins extended Torrey Hunter for another 4 years. At the time, Hunter was coming off the best season of his career so far. With power, speed, and defense, he became one of baseball's top outfielders. The Twins didn't want to wait and see what came next. They wanted to build around him. From 2003 to 2007, Hunter became exactly what they wanted him to be. Gold Glove defense every year and a middle-of-the-order bat that made the Twins lineup dangerous. He wasn't just producing, he was setting the tone. By committing early, the Twins locked in one of the most complete young players in his prime. He wasn't just a highlight reel, he was a foundation. Some players earn their contracts quietly night after night. Hunter did it by running down fly balls and making Minnesota feel like home. This is one of the best free agent pitcher signings. On this day in baseball, January 18th, 2015, the Washington Nationals signed Max Scherzer to a 7-year, $210 million contract. And at the time, it was one of the biggest pitching deals in baseball. Scherzer already arrived with a legacy carved in stone. He was a Cy Young Award winner, he's been to the World Series, and he's known for intensity and preparation and a refusal to give in no matter the cost. As a National, Scherzer delivered again and again. Strikeouts came in bunches, complete games felt possible again, and then came the nights that defined careers. There was the 20 strikeout game, which I was lucky to attend, and threw 2 no-hitters and won multiple Cy Young Awards in Washington. And when October came calling, he helped deliver the Nationals their first world championship in franchise history. He didn't just pitch, he set the standard. By the time it was over, he didn't just live up to the contract. He had given the Nationals dominance, credibility, and the biggest moments in franchise history. Max Scherzer didn't arrive asking for belief. He arrived demanding the ball and left with a legacy that matched the money. Baseball is always paid for power, but on this day, it paid for something else. On this day in baseball, January 11th, 1983, Ozzie Smith was given the richest contract ever for a shortstop at the time, getting paid $1 million annually for the first time at the position. Smith wasn't known for his bat. He was known for his glove and instincts and range and plays that also looked impossible until he made them look routine. Gold gloves and highlights followed, and a championship defense just the year prior. By crossing that $1 million line, Ozzie didn't just set the standard of how he should be paid, but also how other shortstops around the league should be. Power fills the box score, but defense fills the memory. And on this day, Ozzie Smith proved that brilliance with a glove could also break the bank. One team needed pitching while the other needed a bat that could change the lineup. On this day in baseball, January 20th, 2023, the Minnesota Twins acquired Pablo Lopez for batting champion Luis Arias. Two All-Stars with two very different games. Lopez was coming off 2 solid seasons in Miami, but the Marlins at the time had surplus in young arms, and he was just the guy that needed to be shipped. Meanwhile, in Minnesota, Luis Arias was known for being a hit machine, despite his poor defense and lack of power. Lopez arrived to Minnesota and contributed immediately, pitching to a 3.68 ERA and a 1.16 ERA plus and K per 9 of 10 in the last 3 seasons. Arias proceeded to hit a league-leading 354 batting average while flirting with 400 for most of the year, and was traded to San Diego in 2024, where he proceeded to lead the league in batting average again, becoming the only player to be traded 3 times and lead the league in batting average in 3 separate seasons. Both had different jobs and had the same impact. On this day in baseball, January 21st, 1921, MLB hired its first commissioner. And it was this man, Kennesaw Mountain Landis. Before becoming a commissioner, he was a federal judge in the Chicago area. And baseball desperately needed law and order after the 1919 Black Sox scandal, where 8 players of the 1919 White Sox allegedly got in bed with gamblers and threw the World Series for better pay. After the scandal, there was a lot of public distress over the game of baseball, so Landis was hired to fix that. In his first order of business, ban 8 players from the 1919 White Sox who were allegedly in bed with the gamblers. Landis was given sweeping power, complete control, and followed the rule of law when it came to the players and the owners. And MLB never got into bed with gambling again. And everybody in the public loves the commissioner. The Twins let this Hall of Famer go, and he became one of the greatest Red Sox to ever play. On this day in baseball, January 22nd, 2003, David Ortiz was signed by the Boston Red Sox just weeks after being released by the Minnesota Twins. Ortiz had power but not certainty, as he was injury-riddled and the Twins didn't like how he was going to project throughout the rest of his career. But things changed once he got to Boston. Ortiz hit 31 home runs, a career high once he got to Boston, and became their go-to cleanup man. And then October happened. Big Papi became one of the most clutch players, not just in Red Sox history, but in baseball history, especially in the postseason. Ortiz helped bring Boston 3 world championships home, including ending the 80-plus year World Series drought started by the curse of the Babe. And now there's a plaque of Ortiz in Cooperstown. He may not have arrived with headlines, but he got a second chance and a Hall of Fame career. Everyone thought this Hall of Famer was done. On this day, January 26, 2006, the Oakland A's took a gamble on future Hall of Famer Frank Thomas on a 1-year deal. Frank Thomas was a legend in the South Side, amassing over 440 home runs and over 2,000 hits in a White Sox uniform. However, things soured in his final 2 years in Chicago as injuries piled up, and he missed the entirety of the White Sox World Series run in 2005. And then along came the Oakland A's, who took a flyer on him on a 1-year deal. This contract ended up being a huge steal that he went back to his superstar form, and at age 38 put up near MVP numbers, finishing behind David Ortiz, Derek Jeter, and Justin Morneau in MVP voting. Frank Thomas will always be remembered as a Southside legend, but his 1 year, technically 2 years in Oakland should never be forgotten. Twins once extended 2 of their stars on the same day. January 25th, 2008, Justin Morneau and Michael Kadire were both extended by the Twins. Morneau is already a proven ball player, having won MVP controversially over Alex Rodriguez, and was coming off his first All-Star season the year prior. Kadire, on the other hand, was a versatile outfielder who could play third base and first base, who is coming off his career best season at that point, putting up 3 WAR for the first time. Morneau may have never put up MVP numbers again, but he did have 2 very good seasons before injuries hit him hard between 2011 and 2013, where he was eventually traded to the Pirates. Kadire became a streaky hitter, having 2 very good seasons and 2 not-so-good seasons during the rest of his contract with the Twins. But during his contract year, he did finally make his first All-Star game. Homegrown stars and clubhouse leaders, they weren't just great players, they were twins. Detroit at the time signed one of the most feared hitters in the game. On January 24th, 2012, the Detroit Tigers signed longtime first baseman of the Brewers, Prince Fielder, to a 9-year deal. Fielder was already an established slugger in Milwaukee. He had a 50 home run campaign in 2009. He was coming off a 38 home run campaign, and he was doing it while hitting with a high average and walking a bunch and playing every day. He would do the same thing in Detroit, hitting 55 home runs total over 2 years, and took the Tigers to a World Series where they eventually lost to the Giants. Unfortunately, things would somber for Fielder as he had to retire early due to a neck issue that bothered him throughout his time in Texas. I have more on Prince Fielder on my YouTube channel at ItsJakeSports, so go visit that for more baseball content. Fielder's contract reminds us that contracts are permanent, but careers are fragile. I've been busy. I was watching the Seahawks game yesterday too, so now let's go back to this day in baseball. January 3rd, 2019, Ichiro Suzuki got to retire on his own terms by signing a minor league deal with the Seattle Mariners to eventually retire during the Japan series. Ichiro's skills started to fade as he was 45 years old, and he got to retire in the place it all started, back in Japan, and with the team that eventually signed him to a free agent deal nearly 18 years ago, as of when he signed this minor league deal. Ichiro got to 3,000 hits and has the most hits of all time between Japan and the United States. 300 plus lifetime hitter, owns the single season hit record, MVP, Rookie of the Year, and he's a Hall of Famer. He was a legend who got to retire on his own terms despite his ability being dampened. He got to retire in his home country with the team that signed him. The Phillies included this minor leaguer as a throw-in, and he ended up being a Hall of Famer. On this day in baseball history, January 27th, 1982, the Philadelphia Phillies and the Chicago Cubs traded shortstops Ivan DeJesus for Larry Bowa. Bowa would join the Cubs after a long 12-year career with the Philadelphia Phillies. DeJesus was coming off the worst year of his career after 4 solid seasons in the North. But the trade wasn't complete. The Phillies ended up including this minor leaguer as a throw-in, as he wasn't even a top prospect. That player ended up being Ryne Sandberg, and he's one of the greatest second basemen of all time. Sandberg was a 9-time Gold Glover, 7-time Silver Slugger, and made 10 All-Star games, including an MVP. He also played the rest of his years in Chicago, only playing 13 games with the Philadelphia Phillies. What looked like a one-for-one trade for defensive shortstops ended up being one of the most historic trades in baseball history. I am here at one of the last days of Dinosaur USA, but we got some time to talk baseball. On this day in baseball, January 28th, 1958, unfortunately, Roy Campanella had to end his career after a car accident. Campanella wasn't just one of the best catchers in baseball, he was one of the best players in baseball at the time, having won 3 MVPs in his career. Campanella was one of the first black players in Major League Baseball after Jackie Robinson. And despite his career being shortened, he was able to accomplish so much. I said 3 MVPs earlier. He brought a championship to Brooklyn for the first time and was a trailblazer in the game. After his career was over, Roy Campanella ended up being an important figure in civil rights next to his teammate Jackie Robinson, and is considered one of the best catchers of all time. All right, and it's time to ride dinosaurs. Rest in peace to a great MLB ride. Fans didn't actually always vote for the All-Star Game. January 30th, 1958, Commissioner Ford Frick removed the voting rights from fans from the All-Star Game due to alleged ballot stuffing by Cincinnati Reds fans. I mean, I get it. They've all related to alleged ballot stuffing before. I mean, do you all remember this in 2015? Instead, the All-Star Game was going to be voted on by the players and coaches. However, the fan vote was brought back in the 1970s, and players and coaches would vote on the pitchers and the bench players, which is still going on to this day. But I want to know what you guys think. Do you think fans should be voting on the All-Star Game when we have alleged ballot stuffing before? I am here at Islands of Adventure here at Universal Studios, and let's see what happened on this day in baseball. On January 29th, 2013, the Miami New Times investigated biogenesis for the use of performance-enhancing drugs for star players such as Alex Rodriguez. Several major and minor league players such as Rodriguez, Johnny Peralta, and Nelson Cruz were eventually suspended because of this scandal, with A-Rod being received a 211-game suspension, which was then reduced to a full season, 162 games. This came just years after the Mitchell report that was released in 2007 that indicted players such as Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens as steroid users. And since then, Alex Rodriguez and Nelson Cruz have complicated Hall of Fame legacies. Come back tomorrow and you'll find out another thing that happened on this day in baseball. Greatest player to ever live was once the highest paid player per a 1-year contract. January 31st, 1992, the Pittsburgh Pirates signed their franchise star Barry Bonds to a 1-year, $4.7 million contract. This actually set the record by 4 days. Cecil Fielder had signed a $4.5 million 1-year deal with the Detroit Tigers on January 28th of 1992. This is a great year for Bonds, like many. He won MVP that season. He took the Pirates to the NLCS, where they ultimately lost to the Atlanta Braves on the Sid Bream play. And he had another 30-30 season. Bonds would eventually move over to San Francisco, where he had a historic deal, and his legend lived on by eating a balanced breakfast every day. Bonds had a great year in Pittsburgh, and he eventually left the city as the best player of his generation.